The next set of tools we're going to look at here in Adobe Photoshop are the dodge and burn tools, and you'll notice them here underneath the blur tools, signaled by a closed hand and magnifying glass that's closed, and also you'll notice that there's a sponge tool. So we basically have these three tools: dodge, burn, and sponge. First, we're going to look at the dodge tool, and these are brush-driven tools, so we can determine how much of an area they have impact on based upon the brush that we have chosen. So first of all, you'll notice that there's some controls across the top, and with each of these we can determine what area of the photograph is being affected: the shadows, the midtones, or the highlights. And very often, because we are dodging in this particular case, we would want to lighten the shadows. We can also control exposure, and you may want to start off at 100%, or if it's an effect that you want to slowly build up to, then you may want to turn your exposure down. It's also pretty straightforward. If we choose a brush that's a little bit bigger just for the effect of it, maybe 218, that'll work fine. It's pretty straightforward. It's what you would think that it would do, and that is wherever you click and drag your mouse, it's going to lighten that area. So you'll notice here with the tomato, it's just lightening the shadow areas. It's subtle, but it's still happening. Okay, and I'll show you before and after here using history. We have before and after. So if you pay attention to the shadow area here, you'll see before, after. So it makes a pretty profound effect. Now if we switch the range to midtones and went over it again, you notice that it's going to lighten the midtone areas, and it'll also lighten the shadow areas some as well, just because usually the shadow areas include some midtone range from a pixel density perspective. So now if we look at the difference, this is before the midtone dodge and after. Okay. Darken or burn works the same way, and I'm going to increase the brush size again just so we can see it. So again, it works exactly the same way. You can control the same areas: shadows, midtones, and highlights. You can adjust the exposure. I'm going to turn it up to 100% just for effect. But again, just like dodge, burn is simply left mouse clicking and dragging, and everywhere it touches, it burns in that image, which is basically a form of darkening it. So you can actually use this to paint in shadows, okay, because it maintains the integrity of the photograph itself. It just darkens it. Same with, like, if I wanted to, say, enhance the shadows of this tomato here, I would use the burn tool to do that and just, again, paint in those shadow areas a little bit. So you can really use it to help accentuate areas of your photograph that perhaps, you know, could use a little extra contrast or a little boost or whatever between light and dark. And that's one of the big benefits. However, there is another way of using it with non-photographs. Like, for instance, with our Dexter character here that we were looking at and working with earlier. If I turn the size down, for instance, to say 33, I can actually use dodge and burn to add dimensional effects to his coloring. And his coloring isn't really pronounced, but I'll show you what I mean. One thing that I like to do is isolate colors that I'm working on, and the easiest way to do that is by using the Magic Wand tool. So if I select just his hair, and I'm going to hold the shift key down and click in the curl areas as well, and then with the selection active, I can actually choose Control H or Command H to hide the selection. So it's still active, but I just can't see it. And then switching over to the burn tool, if I apply the burn tool just to the edge the bottom edge of his hair. Because the hair is selected, it won't affect any other part of the image, but you'll be able to see what happens, so just watch. So you notice now that whenever I'm dodging, it's actually darkening just his hair here. And if I switch over to the dodge tool and turn it down, and because this is a lighter color, we'll switch to highlights again. So now it's lightening the color. Okay, so it gives you an ability to add a little extra dimensionality to a picture. Let's take this one step further, and just to, by way of example, let's select his coat, and let's just fill it with the green since we have it here. So I'm going to choose Edit, Fill, and you know what? What I'm going to actually do is create a new layer, and I'm going to, because we have the selection and I want to make sure that it fits into the area, what I'm actually going to do is choose Select, Modify, Expand. Remember when we did that before? And I'm going to just expand it 2 pixels, and then choose Edit Fill with the foreground color. And we can deselect it, and then we're going to be talking more about layers in a later video, but for now we're going to take this layer and change the blend mode, which is located right here, from normal to multiply. That way the color multiplies into the white and it's trapped by the black outline that's there. The other thing we're going to do is click lock with this layer selected, and the reason why we're going to lock it is essentially for the same reason that we had the selection of his hair selected and hidden. It limited the effect of the brush to just his hair. Okay, so now if we come back over to our dodge and burn tools, and let's switch to mid-tones here, you'll notice that if actually let's go with a slightly smaller brush, that if I come down across the top, you notice that it's lightening the top area of the green. Okay, and essentially what you're doing here is mimicking the effects of light. Okay, so let's turn this down, and then I can come across the bottom and just add a little extra shadow as well, so that it gives the image a little bit more dimensionality and effect. So you can use dodge and burn that way to really create some interesting effects on two-dimensional illustrations, as well as adjusting regular photographs. Now the last tool in this group is the sponge tool, and the sponge tool basically has a couple different functions. Let's make it bigger again for effect, and you'll see it here in the mode, desaturate or saturate. So it works together with one of the hue functions, which is saturate and desaturate. If we leave it on desaturate, and let's just turn it up to 100% for effect, essentially what it does is removes the color. Okay, and so we could take like this tomato right here, or let's take this one here, and everywhere I paint, notice how it's starting to desaturate the color. And you can build this up in layers. So remove a layer of color and then go back and paint over it a second time to remove more color. You can go back over it a third time and desaturate it even more. And because this was red, it's actually making the picture a lot darker. We could go back then to our dodge tool and use that to lighten up the tomato a little bit if we wanted it to really stand out as a black and white tomato in a color world, so to speak. But with this saturate and desaturate, or well, it's the sponge tool is what it's called, you'll notice that you have the ability to control vibrance. Vibrance is just one of the color qualities in a color photograph that determines brilliance, and instead of hue. Hue controls the tonal range of the color. Vibrance controls how brilliant the color is. So if you want to protect the vibrance, the desaturation is going to be much more subtle, as you can see. Now if I switch to saturate, we could have, say, a bland color like the tomato here, which you notice was kind of grayish looking, and it super enhances the end result. So it gives it's a way of giving your image or a part of your image some extra pop. Like you'll notice right here, the stem and leaves kind of look a bit drab. So I could use the sponge tool set to saturate to just kind of pop up the color in the stem a little bit. Now if I apply it here to this tomato, because we've already desaturated it, it's not really going to do anything. But notice like this tomato here doesn't really look all that brilliant. I can apply the saturate version of the sponge tool to it, and it'll just brighten up some of those colors. Like so. So definitely another good tool to have in your arsenal.